it definitely made me shift more resources towards messaging. Actually, at one point a couple of years ago, I think I put the entire stories team on messaging.
Wow. Why?
Because it was where, if you take out all the text, there are more photos and videos shared in DMs than there are shared in stories. And there's way more shared in stories than there is in feed. So just forget about the text for a second. Just the photos and videos, just the media, the rich media. It's a bigger deal and growing faster in DMs than anywhere else.
Adam, I am so excited for this one. We said just beforehand how many reference calls I've done. I had nothing but wonderful things. So thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. You have to have heard some bad things, I feel like.
Well, I mean, it's coming in question 2. I thought I'd start with a nice one. But the nice one and the kind of ease intro, I normally do that, how did you get into tech? But I think it was Sam Lessin who said about your first job as a bartender and what you learned from it. I was intrigued to start on that.
Bartending was one of my first jobs, just paying for sort of rent and stuff in New York in university. I think it's good. I spent a lot of time as a teenager in service. So bartending, as a waiter, dishwasher, like short chef, that kind of thing. And I think service is a really good thing to do early in life because it teaches you some humility, but also how to work with people in a wide range of people, because you end up with all sorts of clients, whether you're waiting or bartending specifically, and then figuring out how to manage different personalities at a young age, I think is also a good thing. And then also, it's just good to appreciate good service. You end up being a good tipper for life.
I totally agree with you. It's funny, actually. I think it's Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. The highest rated point on your CV you can have is if you worked at McDonald's.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Because time pressures, difficult customers, lots of different moving parts. It's actually challenging in so many different ways.
I believe it. I totally believe it.
My first job was selling mobile phones on eBay.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right.
But then I heard about kind of the transition from bluntly very young and junior designer to the incredible product leader that we have today. Talk to me about that and the early days of being a junior designer and how you felt about what you needed to do to become a product leader.
As a designer, I love design. I honestly, if I could wave a magic wand, I think I would be a specialist. I've always romanticized the amazing machine learning engineer, the amazing product designer, the amazing data scientist or architect or shoemaker. It's just not my shape. I'm not great at anything, really. I just have a wide range of things that I can do reasonably well. So my strength is my breadth. And so for me, I loved design, but I was solidly middle of the pack at best. I made up for lack of natural talent with just sheer brute force, just hours. And I think that was good, and I think I learned a lot that way. And I actually took a lot from my time as a designer around problem solving. Can I
ask just on what did you take from your time at design on problem solving?
So design, I think, is about really making sure you're incredibly clear about what problem it is that you're solving, articulating multiple solutions, figuring out how to effectively evaluate those solutions, figuring out how to really take feedback and sift through the noise and find the signal. And I think you can apply that to most anything. And so I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed structured thinking and iteration, but also some creativity blended in there. But like I said, I wasn't great at it. And then Brett Taylor was my boss, and I was the director of design for mobile. This might be 2012. And then he left.
Can I be really rude?
Yeah.
If you're not great at it and you're middle of the pack, how do you become director of design?
Well, when I first started, it's better now, and it actually was better in 2012 to be fair, but when I first started, we had this amazingly talented group of designers. I don't know how many there were, somewhere between 8 and 12 of us. And they just did whatever they wanted. It was one of those weird things where they were talented, they got really good work done, they worked really hard, and you would ask them to work on something and they would smile and nod and they would work on something else. Whatever they thought was the most important thing. This is Matt Cahill and Saleo and Blaise de Persia and all these characters. And I was reliable because I had a job before Facebook. I ran a small design firm. I was used to having clients and felt like I had a bias towards doing what the client asked for. So when I joined a company, I had a bias towards doing what my boss asked me for. And so I think that helped me get a leg up.
Can I be rude and ask, do you think like a really important thing in terms of scaling from, IC to leader is understanding that internal politics? And do you think you kind of understood it in a way that others didn't?
Maybe a little. I think that it became clear to me that a lot of times for the people who are senior at the company, and I was not senior, what they really wanted was to be able to hand you a problem and then not to hear anything back from you until it was solved. And so I kind of I internalized this early because that's kind of how I felt when I was a boss running my own design firm. And so I just remember with a couple people, I just was like, look, whenever I got handed something, I didn't tell them this. I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna do it and fix it and do it well, and then they're not gonna hear back from me. Might be a day, might be a week, might be a month, until the answer or the response is, I took care of that, just so you know. And so I definitely leaned into that for a number of years.
Do you feel you have that today with the people in your team? That sounds like a dream to me as a manager. I don't have that.
No, I don't. But I don't know if I want it. I love my team. I have so much affection for my team, probably more than is healthy. But and part of it is because they're all, particularly my directs, they're all much better at me at something, and I can learn from them. And so I try and create an environment where they can challenge me. I know that sometimes I take up too much air in the room, so I'm always trying to figure out how to delegate more, how to empower them more publicly, so that they don't do the wrong thing even if I ask them to do it.
You said about them challenging you. I love Gustav, who's the CPO at Spotify, and he said talk is cheap and so we should do more of it when it comes to product. I thought it was very Swedish of you.
Wait, what? Talk is cheap. No, I understood it. It just wasn't where I thought that quote was going to go.
And so my question to you is, like, bluntly, do you agree with that? Talk is cheap and inspiring that internal debate? Or are you more like my mindset, which is bluntly velocity and get shit done, move fast?
It's a balance. And this will feel like a cop-out maybe to you, but so I do think that as a lead, you need to talk a lot. And I think people underestimate this. It's just weird. We do it at our company. Our business model is ads and marketing. Mm-hmm. If you talk to anybody in that world, they'll tell you it's not just about the message, it's also about the frequency of how often you deliver that message. Mm-hmm. And then internally, we decide we're going to do something different. We make a post internally, and 1 out of 8 employees reads it, and we move on with our lives, and we're surprised when the whole company doesn't move along with us. And so I've tried to really embrace some advice I got early. Who was this from? I forget who it was. It'll come back to me, which was, if you really want to move the team on something, you need to say it until so many times that you literally want to throw up in your mouth if you say it again, and then you need to say it again and again and again and again. And it can be tough because you can feel like you're not being heard, or you can feel like you're being predictable or just annoying. But the truth is, people need to hear things multiple times to fully internalize them. And so I do think from the part of that quote that resonates is, like, I do think you need to talk a lot. Now, I also think you need to be very clear about when you're just going to make a call and when you're not. And there are some times where it's like, no, if I don't make this call, we're going to waste too much time, or I have the right occasionally as a leader to just use my, veto power, so to speak. But then you have to be careful, because if you do that too much, you stifle creativity, you don't create enough space, you cannot hire or retain the most creative and interesting talent. So you have to use that sparingly. But that's like a card to play, and you can play it every once in a while, but you can't play it every day. At least is my experience.
Can I ask, if you were my mentor and I was a product or design kind of IC, and I wanted to make the transition, knowing all you know now, is there anything that you'd advise me in terms of making that transition?
From an IC to a manager, or to like a more senior leader?
From an IC to a manager and a product leader.
Honestly, anybody early in their career is probably just to get a range of different experiences. I think it's super important to broaden your skill set, even if you don't, or to even just experiment with different types of work, whether maybe you're still a designer, but you're designing in different types of projects in the ad space, in the consumer space, and the enterprise space, so that you can figure out in a more informed way what your values are, what matters to you, what your aspirations are. Because the most important thing over the long run is that whatever you want to be professionally, that you're clear and honest with yourself about that. And then you need to shape your work to be an overlap between what helps you achieve that, and then if you work at a company, what the company needs of you. And your manager's job is to find that overlap and help you with that, but not everyone's a great manager. And so I think you need to do that proactively. And I think early on in the career, if you want to get into management or become a more senior leader, I think range is valuable even if you want to be a specialist, because I think it helps you make a more informed decision about the stake in the ground you want to place, about what your aspirations are. But you also have to be okay picking that stake up and moving it, because maybe you learn something and it changes. But it's better to move towards a goal that you set and change it later than to float through. And large companies and quickly growing companies like the one I work for will just pull you week to week in the fire of the week. And so if you don't put that stake in the ground, you can really lose a lot of time and then pop your head up and be like, whoa, I don't even know how I spent this last 12 months.
Speaking of putting a stake in the ground, and speaking of advice there, I did want to ask, obviously you kind of then became CEO of Instagram. And I think one of my favorite questions to ask is, if you could, with all you know now, call up Adam the night before your first day as CEO of Instagram and give yourself some advice on what's to come, what you could or should know, what would that advice have been?
It probably would be more like emotional support. It probably would just be patient. The first
Has
year...
it been more emotionally challenging than you thought?
The first year was really tough. 3-4 months in, my take was like, I've made a horrible mistake. Just
Why was that? Just too much?
It was a lot. I mean, we lost our... we didn't only lose Mike and Kevin, who are amazing product thinkers, and part of the reason I joined Instagram was to work with them. We ended up losing pretty much our whole leadership team a little bit before and a little bit after that. So in my first year, I had to hire a head of design, engineering, product management, data science, research, HR, communications, marketing, and a COO. And so it's just a lot. So there was a period there where I was very alone, and that was what was really hard, because I feel like if you have a really strong staff, and they have trust and they get along and they can challenge each other and they bring different skills, you can kind of take on anything. And if you don't, anything can become a problem. And that trough and that 4 or 5 months in was pretty
Can
tough.
I ask, who did you talk to? Because that is lonely. And CEO-ship is a really lonely endeavor.
Yeah, that was very lonely. Who did I talk to back then? I talked to some friends who are CEOs of other companies.
What did they advise you?
And to focus on things that would pay off longer term. So they're like, look, you can mess things up in the short term, but get your staff into place. Aim high, don't compromise, because maybe that'll make the next 3 months worse, but then the next 3 years will be better.
Yeah.
I talked to Will Cathcart a lot, who runs WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I think he was running the Facebook app at the time, but he's been a good guy to bounce ideas off of for a long time now. Some friends outside of the company who had left the company who knew it, but some people who had just totally just... Was
it difficult bringing in a whole new C-suite and making them gel together? This is hard.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. I've been lucky. I have an amazing team. I've made a few mistakes in hiring, but for the vast majority of those hires I made in that first year are still at the company and still in the positions at Instagram. But yeah, you have to kind of pick the people based on their skills, but also based on, does the group end up with the set of skills you need from the group as opposed from each individual? And then you kind of have to also try and build that and pick people for whom they're going to have some chemistry without having them all be alike. And that's an art, not a science. So, it's a work in progress, but I just think it's important to spend time on. I'm always working on figuring out how to increase the rapport and the trust within that senior-most team.
You mentioned Kevin and Mike there. It's a very difficult thing taking over a founder-led company as a kind of new CEO. What are one or two of your biggest lessons, having done it now very successfully with Instagram?
I mean, one is actually some advice that Kevin and Mike gave me later. So Kevin and Mike, they were very supportive, and I'm very grateful to them for a lot of reasons. And I had a drink with them maybe 6 or 9 months in. And I had spent a ton of time that year trying to make sure that the team was in a good place. There was a lot of anxiety with the founders leaving. Are we going to get swallowed by the big company? Are we going to lose our identity? And, I spent a lot of time trying to clarify our identity, to try to, boost morale, team meetings, round tables, Q&As, all this kind of stuff. And Kevin's advice was, look, that's all nice, but really what's going to boost morale more than anything else is just doing really good work and succeeding in the market, and everything else is kind of noise. And I don't think he said it quite that and it's quite such a black and white way, but more or less that was the message. And I think he's right. I still value investing in org leadership and communication a lot. I spend a lot of time on it. I do weekly Q&As with my whole team. But I really do think that over the long run, the thing that's going to get people the most rallied, the most excited, the most motivated, the most effective is doing good work and being successful. And so I've been trying to balance that and make sure that I don't do too much to focus on the short-term reactionary, and more to focus on how do we really just deliver over years, as opposed to worry about something that someone might be upset about this week.
What's your message to the team when you come in? Is it like, this is a continuation of what we've done before? Is it like, this is a change in how we're doing it and we should be excited? How did you approach that?
I said, I'm going to be a sponge, and I'm going to try and learn as much as I can as quickly as I can, and I'm not going to push for any change for at least a couple months. I ended up breaking my promise in one place, but for the most part kept it, and I think that helped.
Where did you break your promise?
The safety and integrity work, we were running too much of our own stuff and not leveraging the much larger teams at Facebook and in the central teams. I think there were more engineers that worked on safety and integrity at the company at the time than worked at all of Instagram. And so I was like, let's just tap into that. they're dealing with all of this hard stuff. And so that was a big culture shift for that team, to go from defining and implementing and enforcing your own policies to integrating with a much larger machine, so to speak. But it was also the midterm elections. It was 2018. I was like, we just can't wait. Sorry, guys. Like you said before, sometimes you just have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it ruffles some feathers.
But sometimes you make a decision and it's not the right decision. Sometimes mistakes are made. When you think about kind of a fuck up or two that happened in the process, are there any that stand out to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, you got to make mistakes. I will say, the biggest blow up was the press cycle the summer before last around what was called externally Panavision, which actually meant something different internally. And it was a confluence of a bunch of different changes that were happening at once. So it ended up being one of those words that people just projected onto it whatever they didn't like, and so it kind of took on a life of its own. So we were introducing recommendations into feeds, so content that is not from accounts you follow, very controversial. We were leaning into video. And our heritage is photos, also controversial. Creators were frustrated with their reach, and I think some of that was for good reason, and some of it's because people always want more reach. And we were also experimenting with a pretty radically new design for the main tab. It just all was a little bit too much too fast, and it all kind of blew up in our face. And then there was an interaction between the creator community and the media, and it kind of ping-ponged. And then I did a video explaining what we were doing, and then I became a meme for a week, which was fun. I think The Daily Show did a pretty funny, actually, but biting impression of me.
Was it funny at the time? Were you like, oh no?
So I was trying to calibrate, because on one hand, I do think that if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying big enough things. So if I had no big painful moments in the last couple of years, that would mean that we were being too conservative. So I'm glad, even though it was not fun. On the specific, all the memes of like a banana, I was wearing a yellow sweater in the video, so there was a lot of banana, a lot of mini me memes, a lot of stuff. So I was sending stuff to some friends, being like, is this mean or is this funny? Because it's hard for me to tell. And my brother's like, this is just funny. But the best is I sent a bunch to my wife, and she didn't respond to any of it. And she just wasn't interested, I guess. And so this was all happened for a whole week, and then a week later, she's like, hey, what happened again this week? You said something was going on? And I was like, don't even worry about it.
Can I ask a weird one? Which is when you have the controversial elements, I love the recommendations actually that are in my feed. They're all highly personalized according to what I have already. It's a great addition. I mostly follow new people because of the recommendations.
Yeah.
but it's controversial. When you have two opposing kind of, not teams, but ideologies almost internally, how do you resolve that?
I think the key thing is you make sure both sides are heard, and then you make it very clear who's the decision maker, and you make it very clear when there's a decision. And you have to remind people that it's important to disagree and commit, because if you're just going to question a decision upstream, downstream over and over again, you're just going to do everything poorly. That one is tough, though, because obviously people always... not always, but there's a bias a lot of us have to want things to return to the way they were, even though that's not possible.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I always think about it with like the iPhone. Do you remember when they removed the home button? Yeah. And they did the swipe? I was like, this is shit. Yeah. Total crap. Now I'm like, what the fuck is this
why would I want a giant bezel
at the bottom? But these are hard product decisions in the moment.
Yeah.
When you think back over the time at Instagram, what's been the hardest product decision for you?
That one was. Really leaning into recommendations and feed. That was the hardest.
And why was that for you?
Because I just knew there was going to be so much backlash. It wasn't because I questioned if it was the right thing. It was so clearly the right thing to do. Basically, what people don't realize is they think of Instagram as a feed of square photos, sometimes in chronological order. And if you look at how people share, all of the growth has been in stories and in DMs over the last 5 years or so. And to the degree there is growth in feed, it's all in video. It's not in photos in a lot of ways, at least in terms of what people consume. And, if you look at how teens spend their time on Instagram, they spend more time in DMs than they do in stories, and they spend more time in stories than they do in feed. Yet people think of Instagram as a feed, and it's the third most important surface at best, maybe fourth now, for teens, who are some of the most important communities on the platform. Plus, all the friend sharing is moving in that direction, but you don't share personal moments in feed today the way you did 5 or 10 years ago. You share them in stories or in messages more so. And so feed had to evolve. Otherwise, it would just slowly, die or decay, exactly. And so recommendations are a way to tap into this huge, rich repertoire of amazing content that exists on the platform that you might not even know about yet, and continue to make sure that feed is alive and well. And people, they say like, "Well, you don't show enough of my friends' posts." It's because your friends don't post that much to feed, but it's easier to think it's the algorithm. So it was so clear the right thing to do, but it was so clear that everyone was going to it was so clear that it was going to become a scapegoat. For anything you didn't like about Instagram, you would just blame the Recs. Recs is what we call recommendations for short internally.
What does that mean for you internally when you see that DMs and messages is number one? Do you then go, we should move up resources towards messaging? Do you then think we're a messaging application? Like, how does that change how you think with the recognition that DMs and messaging is one?
It definitely made me shift more resources towards messaging. Actually, at one point a couple of years ago, I think I put the entire stories team on messaging.
Wow. Why?
Because it was where, if you take out all the text, there were more photos and videos shared in DMs than there are shared in stories. And there's way more shared in stories than there is in feed. So just forget about the text for a second. Just the photos and videos, just the media, the rich media. It's a bigger deal and growing faster in DMs than anywhere else.
Wow.
But the thing is, we're not a messaging app. If I was going to run late to today's podcast, the best way to let you know would probably be to text you on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on Instagram. What Instagram DMs are great for is they provide you an excuse to start a conversation. We call them conversation starters a lot internally. You can, if you switch universities or you're going to uni for the first time, you switch high schools, you have a crush. Replying to someone's story is socially acceptable in a way that a cold text is not. Sending them a funny reel you found in feed, or more recently, notes. Notes are, basically AIM status, but better looking and at the top of the inbox. Anybody above 20 doesn't use them very much. Unbelievable how much they've moved Instagram engagement overall, app level engagement for teens. And they're just an excuse to start a conversation. Yes, what you're up to, but maybe it's a question, but they're just a reason to give someone a buzz.
How do you think, because I think that's a really fundamentally challenging product paradigm to navigate through though, which is a large portion of your audience doesn't want it, won't use it, but it will ignite a different segment. That's really challenging because you've got this broad swathe. respectfully, and Jack at Snap's going to kill me for this. It's kind of easier for him because he's going to really kill me for this. It's mostly just teens. So it's an isolated demographic. For you, you need to incorporate it for everyone, knowing that only one segment will use it.
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways to deal with it. The first, though, is you have to be okay. I think it's super valuable to be willing to prioritize certain segments over others. And for us, we care about young people and we care about creators most. Because young people, I mean, they grow up, but also they are where creators gravitate to over time, and they set trends. And they often serve as a bellwether. And creators, I just think, are becoming more and more important over time for a bunch of reasons we can go into. And so the first thing is to be willing to make that prioritization decision and be like, look, I'm going to eat some cost to overall app engagement or even overall revenue in the short term because I think this is going to be better and healthier for the company in the long term, or for Instagram in this case in the long term, because either we'll break out of a local maximum or we'll be more defensible or whatever the argument might be. And then two, I think it's super important if you want to keep the experience simple, and I don't think we've done a good enough job at this, to embrace certain ideas like progressive disclosure. So an app should become more complicated as it needs to be and not be complicated if you don't. And so Notes is a nice example because if none of your friend posted a note, it's just the active now tray. It just shows you who's on right now. And you might not even know that notes are a thing. But if people start to share notes, then it starts to show you both notes and active now next to each other. That's relatively elegant because you can think of your note as a status and your active now as a status, and so it's sort of seamless. But then if you don't, it kind of elegantly turns into something simpler.
Is simple always better in design, Adam?
No, and I'm going to get crucified by a bunch of designers for saying so. I have a strong bias towards simplicity. I think Instagram has benefited greatly from being simple. It's one of the core values we have in our approach. Go back to the Mike and Kevin days, and I believe in it. But I think to say it's always better is a mistake. I think of simplicity as a means to an end, and you have to be clear about what that end is. Maybe it's usability, maybe it's broad appeal, but I think that it's possible. There are instances where a more complicated thing is going to be a better means to that end.
There's one portion of Instagram where you need like 8 clicks back to get back to main feed. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, Adam.
Yeah, no, it's a thing.
Is that deliberate?
No. The app is too complicated. I mean, let's be serious. I think it's gotten more simple over the last 12 months or so. We consolidated some of the design patterns and primitives, removed some of the tabs, but we still have more to do. It's when you manage a large team and they get excited about a new idea, they often want to just build a new thing. And it's tougher and more work to extend an existing pattern or primitive for a new use case than to just invent your own new one, because you have to coordinate and maybe it's not quite as specialized for this thing that you guys are so excited about. But if you don't do that, you just slowly add more and more complexity to the app in a way that I think burns you over the long run, sort of death by a thousand cuts. So we actually have, I was talking to our head of design and one of our product leads 2 days ago about how do we carve out a certain percentage of the team's time to just unship things that aren't used that much or don't create that much value, and proactively look for opportunities to consolidate things to make them simpler and easier to use.
Okay, that's really unfair of me. What do you think you should unship that doesn't create that much value? And which area do you think you haven't tapped that you could or should?
I don't know if there's one one of the things that we did unship was the activity feed. So activity is like your notifications, and there was a place you could go to see essentially like all the things your friends had liked, and it was fun. Like, it was a great way to discover new content, but it's a little bit creepy just to be like, I'm going to check out. And it's like,
what's Adam like?
It's always Adam's liking a lot of this thing right now. That seems a little weird.
Adam, I've told you about OnlyFans before.
Yeah, exactly. I got so much hate in my DMs about that. It was used.
What, OnlyFans?
No. The activity feed.
I'm right, sorry.
It was it was probably it was less than 1% of the users who used it, but that's still,
and they DM
millions
you?
of people. Oh, you should see my DMs, yeah.
Really?
A lot of DMs, yeah.
I just get dick pics.
Oh, nice. I just get, it's my birthday. All I want for my birthday is a blue check mark. I get, you disabled my account unfairly. and I get a lot of just whatever the most recent changes, usually complaints about it. I like to go there once or twice a week. Yeah.
You do?
I like to go in once or twice a week and respond to a couple people.
They must be like incredibly impressed when you respond, no?
Yeah, sometimes they think it's not me. I get that a lot. Actually, I'm on Reddit, and I think my handle is just Adam Mosseri. And every once in a while, I'll just go in and like respond to Instagram things, and no one has ever believed it was me before. They're always like, "Look at this wanker pretending to be Adam," like, and they just tell me to piss off, and I'm just like, "No, it's me. It's
That
me.
is amazing.
This is why we did this.
I promise it's me. It's a real-time picture of me.
Yeah, no. Yeah, exactly. There's no
This
way
is
to
me
prove
working.
it. There's no proof. There's no way to prove it.
Reels was such an important moment, I think. I
Yeah.
think it was such a like strategic, directional decision for the company.
Yeah.
Can you is it the momentous decision that I'm suggesting it is? And can you take me to that decision? And was it just like we're gonna fucking go for TikTok?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, Reels has been huge for us. Reels is, I don't know, maybe pushing 50% of time spent in the app at this point. Not quite there. And before Reels, we had short form video, right? And short form video was a big part of Instagram. But I don't think we had designed the format to really embrace the form factor of a phone. And I think, Reels being full screen, sound on is more fun and immersive, particularly during the pandemic when you're not bothering anybody because you're home. Focus on creators, first person, all of these things were ways to embrace where the world is going and the platform on which we were building. And we hadn't leaned into all of that. And TikTok's rise was just meteoric after years of struggling to get anything to be retentive. And when you see a competitor do something, I think it's super important to be humble enough to learn from it. And sometimes that will mean building something that looks a lot like it. And sometimes it means figuring out what needs it's meeting and how you might meet those needs in a way that's more native to what you do. And then a range of options in between. We lost a whole year. I still go back to this. This is maybe one of my biggest regrets. The first version of Reels we built was built on top of Stories. And it just didn't work. And
Why?
It was because Stories was growing, so we thought Stories would be a good foundation on which to lean into short form video. But the thing that's amazing about Stories is how depressurized they are. People share so much to Stories, and there's just way more stories than anyone has time to see, or most people have time to see. So the read-through rate is very low. I don't know what it is, but it's maybe in the teens. And so you can't build a short-form video product that particularly focuses on creators if most of the videos they create aren't seen. But we were trying to keep Instagram simple. We were trying to double down on the momentum of Stories. We were trying to lean into how younger people use Instagram, and they use Stories way more than they use Feed. And we lost 9 to 12 months. And we ended up getting it right by leaning into Feed and making a couple other strategic changes around recommendations and unconnected content that were right.
That's a really hard decision after 9 months of work. Like the sunk cost of you saying just fucking keep going.
But this was all pre-COVID-19. If we had a solid foundation before everyone was at home and just spending a whole bunch of time on their phones, the whole trajectory of the app would have been completely different. And instead, these things all landed, some before, but a lot after, and mid 2020, late 2020.
Would it have been like? How did it change the trajectory? It was just slower. Like if you were to replay this, if you got it right the first time,
I think how big we are relative to the competition would be super different. And we're catching up. We're growing really fast. I think we're growing the fastest of the big players. But it's very hard because if you're going to try and compete, and we do, right? It's a competition has gotten fiercer every year since I've been at the company. You can't just make something as good as the competition. You have to make something that's better, because why would I bother switching if it's just as good, or even if it's only 10% better? So
do you think Reels is better than TikTok?
For certain segments and not for others. Like TikTok is amazing at a couple of things. They are amazing at exploration-based ranking, so discovering new talent and helping new talent break. Right? We for a long time had a strong bias towards showing people things that we were pretty confident they would like, because a lot of other people liked them, and it's easier to rank that kind of content. And that sort of reinforces the existing hierarchy. And TikTok was really good at building the systems from the ground up to be more content first and to go find things that you might love that you never would have heard of before. And therefore, it was also just really entertaining. Really entertaining. It's really good. I think they still are the most well-executing competitor I think we've ever faced. There's a couple others that are up there, but they're I think at the top of that.
Are they the fastest moving competitor?
Yeah, in the video space, yeah. The other folk who are really fast and really good and I respect a lot is Telegram.
Huh.
Telegram is just, that team is just really good. They build something really well and they can pivot quickly, and when they decide to do something, they get it out.
You know how before I was like, I'm friendly, I ask nice questions, don't worry about it. This might seem unfriendly, but it's said with love.
I spent 5 years running newsfeed. Everything in Instagram has seemed infinitely more friendly.
Well, then this is going to be great. But like, you know, when you look at stories, and you look at its origins with Snap, and you know, then Alex on Schultz told me that it was actually hailed from cacao. They disagree, but you know,
I'm sure they do. It's okay.
And then we look at quite a few of Facebook's kind of innovations, and Threads most recently. Is Facebook just a very efficient copy machine?
I think we're very good at optimizing things, and I think that we are willing to, when somebody pioneers a new format, to go and adopt that format if we think it's going to become an industry standard. And I think Stories is a good example. Stories is like, you see stories everywhere. Stories on YouTube. There's stories on Pinterest for a while.
Yep.
Obviously, Twitter did it for a while. So I think that is part of our DNA, is that we're competitive. We are always worried that, and I think this is good, that the world will change around us and we won't change fast enough to keep up. So we are willing to take risks that sometimes really blows up in our face.
What's the biggest risk that's blown up in your face? Because they all seem to have worked in hindsight.
Well, I do think the Panavision thing a year and a half ago was a pretty rough blow. Maybe it was more my emotional response from being ridiculed by like my favorite comedy show. But that one did feel like it blew up in my face.
Can I ask you a hard one as well, which is like, how do you determine between an innovation that is sustainable and you should learn from and incorporate versus one that I don't know if it's sustainable? You know, we've seen the rise of Be Real.
Yeah.
People have very strong opinions on whether it's sustainable or not. As an investor in Be Real, I will decline to comment.
Yeah. As you should.
But how do you determine between the two?
I mean, I think you try to make sure that you're understanding what is the fundamental human need that's being met, and is that need going to probably persistent or not? I mean, look, Instagram has changed a ton over the years, but a lot of it stayed the same. Like, you know, we've always been focused on inspiring creativity. We've always been focused on bringing people together, and how people share and how people entertain themselves has changed a lot. And so how we do those things needs to change with it, but those fundamental needs are the same. And so when you're looking at either a trend or a competitor or how someone is abusing or a community is abusing the app, you can learn a lot from how people abuse your app. You can try and make sure that if you can explain it not only as based on some sort of viral mechanic, but also based on it meeting a need in a fundamentally richer or better or different way, then you want to play in that space.
What have you learned from how people abuse the app? I didn't ever think about this before.
What's a good example? Early Facebook days, before we had photos, people just kept changing their profile picture. Like every day, multiple times a day. I'm like, oh, sounds like people want to share photos. Maybe we should build that.
I love that. Now, are you ready for Threads?
Yes. I mean, no, but yes.
If we start on Threads, the numbers, and it's just been insane.
It has been insane.
So the first off, and this is the worst interview question ever. You know when like someone wins Wimbledon and they're like, "How do you feel?"
I won the Wimbledon yesterday, and they asked one of the winners of this woman semis, "How do you feel?" She's like,
"Happy."
She's like, "Good."
You'd love it if they're like really depressed. They only got 100 likes on my Insta.
Yeah, it's like my cat is killing me.
But one never knows when they launch a new product. You can get a lot of hate I mean, fuck, a lot of hate.
Yeah.
Did you expect the speed of adoption for Threads?
No. I mean, I thought we had something. I think I did a pod with Kevin and Roos and Casey, and Kevin was asking questions about, like, you guys have launched a lot of separate apps and they usually don't go so well. In fact, I can't think of any. I think he said, and he's like, what do you think of this? And I said, like, look, when you're launching a new app, it's always more likely to fail than succeed. The median number of new apps, I read this somewhere, installed a month is 0 for the average person. So you're swimming upstream. But I did say I was more excited about this one than I have been about anything in a while. But I did want to recognize it was a big risk. And look, the numbers are staggering, but it's just signups. It's way easier to build something that people are willing to try than build something that people want to continue to use in a month or a year from now. So this is day 8. This is the best first 8 days I could have ever possibly imagined. But what really matters is how well do we iterate, how quickly do we improve the experience so that it is compelling enough that people will continue to use it over the long run.
We're going to get to retention. I have a group with like 10 of the best product leaders in the world in it, and
should I be offended on this?
Yes. You actually have to be on the show first.
That's fair.
But one of them said the most important question for me is, can you get him to talk about what went into bootstrapping the Threads graph from day one?
I mean, this is one of the key reasons for the success, is that you sign up and you can not only you sign in with your Instagram account. It's not a separate account. And you can import your identity, but you can also essentially import your graph by just following everyone you already follow. And you can follow people who are not even on Threads yet, so that when they do join, that you automatically are connected. And so that we can even tell you, we can be like, hey, you've got 10,000 followers on this app already. You haven't even installed it yet. Do you want to try it? It's a pretty compelling value proposition.
Sure.
And so I think that was key. Now, look, I do think the public conversation interest graph isn't necessarily the one you're the same in terms of your interest as what you follow on Instagram, which is why we allow the graphs to fork. We will build over time, I think, a graph sync option. So if you want just to have the same graph, you can, and we can make sure that it stays in sync for you. But I think it was also very important, particularly to the team, to allow people to choose a different experience or a different graph if they wanted one. And so I think we found a really good balance between making it really stupid easy to just pull everything in on day one, but also if you cared and you wanted to curate, you could go do that.
How much of an overlap do you actually think there is? I think of it as like my brain and my body, if I'm being totally honest. Body on Instagram. Instagram's my body. I've got like recipes, personal trainers, and like any body stuff.
Yeah.
And then Twitter's like where I gain intellectual advancement. Yeah. And so if I got a feed of like Gordon Ramsay, I'd be like,
he's on there.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I know he was on this. But how should we think about that overlap actually? And how do you actually think about it?
I think it's going to be a very personal choice. I think for a lot of people, it's just going to be easier not to have to think about it and just be like, it's 80% the same anyway. I just want you to keep in sync.
Did you think about starting again from no followers?
Yes.
What was that discussion like?
We talked about it, but we thought that for enough people, probably the majority, but not everybody, that there would be enough overlap that it would make a lot of sense to just allow you to quickly do it. Now, you can also select. You don't have to select the whole group. It just seemed like it would be the majority use case. We also, I mean, look, when we first started building separate experiences, we kept building. We built, the first two were Facebook Home, which was my first PM project, spectacular failure, and Paper. And they were essentially just a repackaging of the Facebook app. So it wasn't sufficiently different that it would really give you a reason to switch. So then we're like, oh, we can't just make the same thing again. We gotta make something different. So we had this Facebook Labs team and we started building all these different things, but there wasn't a reason we should succeed in any of them. They were just like startups, which is great, but in your world, you know this more than anyone, like the odds of success are relatively low, but if you do succeed, it's wildly amazing. But we weren't leaning into our strengths. We weren't integrating into our products. We were just kind of just throwing ideas out. And what Threads, I think, is a really nice balance where it's different enough that there's a reason for it to be a separate app, that we debated that a lot internally. But because there's a heavy overlap in terms of the interest graph between what conversations you want to be privy to and what photos and videos you want to be keeping up with, that it really allowed us to lean into that. And I think there's no way it would have been as successful if you had to bootstrap the graph from scratch.
Tough and direct one. Someone on the show said once that, bluntly, the social graph is terrible at predicting what you like, and just because your friends like it doesn't mean you like it, and that we have totally moved away from the friend graph, and the interest graph is the future of social. Do you agree with that and that binary nature?
No, I think it's too black and white. I do think there's tension. There's a lot of tension. There's, who you care about and who you want to hear from are not the same. What you want your Instagram to be experience to be, if I ask you about it in the abstracts over the long term, is probably pretty different than what you'd like and interact with on a daily basis in the app. That's the tension between sort of first order and second order preferences. And so things are always a bit more complicated. The thing that's really working about Instagram right now with Reels is the connection between the two. So you can see a bunch of amazing videos from people you know or don't know, but aren't necessarily your friends. And then you can share them with your friends in DMs. And that brings your friends back to the app, and then they discover something, and then they might share it with someone else.
I do the send separately a lot to a lot of people, actually, and it's great.
Yeah, and so the thing that I think people don't always realize is video, by its nature as a format, is actually really challenging for all the old social networks. It puts a lot of downward pressure on the ads business, because if you watch one video for 10 seconds, you would have before scrolled through 4 posts and probably seen an ad. And so it's a challenge. Actually, video tends to be good for time spent and bad for everything else. Bad for revenue, bad for comments, bad for likes, bad for sends, etc. What works about Reels, because we have the inbox integrated into Instagram, is this sort of flywheel where you consume things, you send them to friends, then you start a conversation. Maybe they use Instagram more. They want to check out what's going on today. They discover something, they send it back to you or to another friend. And so the fact that growing video has massively grown sends, which is a pure friend-to-friend interaction. Even if you take out the Reels shares, because they start conversations. I might send you a funny football clip, and then we talk about something else. Is really, really exciting, because everything that we did in the video space before that I was involved in at Instagram and Facebook came at the cost of people's connections. And Reels is the opposite. And I think so I do think these things can be symbiotic if you design the experiences thoughtfully, but that doesn't mean there are no tensions.
So do you think Threads and Reels is kind of the integration of the interest graph and the social graph coming together in both of them, actually, in one single platform?
I think it's too early to tell on the Thread side. I think Reels is embracing that people want to consume video, even though they don't share as much video, and giving people a way to connect with friends that embraces that preference. And I think recommendations also help with that. So I think that's sort of the intersection of entertainment and connection or friends, I think, is what's kind of working there. With Threads, we'll see. We will see. I'm just refreshing the dashboard, making sure everything is.
It's 8 days in.
Just trying to make sure the lights are on.
Still working. There was quite an influencer strategy around this.
Yeah.
We mentioned Gordon Ramsay. The influencer activation, I saw it and I was like, Adam,
oh my God.
Sensational.
Such a shout out to the partnerships too.
Yeah, my product group was just going like, emoji like this. Exactly. My question to you is how does that plan go with the influencer activation strategy? I'm just fascinated.
So when you it was very clear, or at least our opinion, maybe it wasn't clear, but when you're starting something new, there's always a question, which is do you need to get people on it so that the creators will come, or do you need to get creators on it so the people will come? And my biggest fear, specifically with Threads, and I think the team had the same fear, was that people would show up and there'd just be nothing there, and be like, I'm out. Seems nice. And so we learned this actually from IGTV a lot too, which is we should focus on the creator side. Because also feeds are very head heavy in general, and so is text. So basically that's to say that you have to assume that Twitter and other feed products in general tend to have most of the content is consumed by a small number. Most of the content consumed is produced by a small number of people. Yeah. So even more so than stories by a lot, actually, and certainly their messaging. So we're like, okay, how do we get there to be a critical mass of content early? And we were trying to create something that was, a less angry space. And so you often, I think, in a way you can't measure, can set the tone for a product with some of the decisions you make up front. So we had always known early that we wanted to get a bunch of creators into the app early. So we actually wanted to do it for longer. We only did it for, I think it was like 40 hours before.
Wow.
And then the partnerships team did a really, really good job.
I'm sorry, I'm super over. Do you just choose J-Lo and Gordon Ramsay?
Oh yeah, no, it's not me. We have a great small, lean, mean partnerships team, and so we picked verticals that we thought would be important because mostly we looked for verticals where they already did well on Instagram, and there was a vibrant commentary community around that. So we do great with athletes. And also, sports commentary is its own sort of genre in a way.
And should I be offended?
Yeah, you should be slightly. Well, we weren't focusing on tech.
Not coming in my product brief.
We were focusing. That's fair. I'll earn it one day. I'll have to ship a couple more things at work. No, we weren't going after tech. We weren't going after news. We weren't going after politics. We were focused on musicians. We're focused on fashion. We're focused on athletes. We're focused on beauty. We're focused on because actually all of those have these amazing, creators and personalities that people are interested in, and all these amazing commentators who talk about that world. And look, everyone's going to come. We're not going to try to be an exclusive club here, but that's what we leaned into for the launch. And so the partnerships team did a really good job.
Do you pay them?
No.
You didn't pay them?
No.
Wow.
We talked about it, but no. It's not scalable. And as soon as you start, it's a very slippery slope. You have to build a platform that provides enough value to someone that they want to share if it's really going to be sustainable over the long run. Mm-hmm. That's not to say you should never pay. We've done performance-based incentives on Instagram before, and I think there are targeted ways to do it. But it's not a scalable solution. So it's got to be a way to learn or a way to bootstrap.
You do a post-mortem on this. It went very well as an influencer activation strategy.
Yes.
Why?
I think it went well for a few reasons. One is we had built a bunch of relationships. Or you're talking about specifically the creator and influencer strategy. One is that we had gotten a bunch of people ready. We actually had wanted to launch earlier, so the partnership team had already kind of engaged everyone, and then we had to delay, so they were ready at a moment's notice because we had originally wanted to be up by VidCon. That helped. I think being opinionated about the verticals helped. I think letting a bunch of people, a few thousand people in on, this was Tuesday, I think we launched Wednesday at midnight UK time, also built a huge amount of hype around it. We ended up having to pull up the launch again because on Wednesday we figured out that we did this pre-order thing on iOS just to kind of build some buzz. And we found out that we couldn't control what time the Apple App Store delivered the app to people's phones, and it would just deliver on midnight Thursday local time. So we became the #1 store in the App Store in Japan, and you couldn't log in because it was
there's a product wall and there's a product wall.
It was a Wednesday morning in California. And so that's why we had to pull it up again. So we ended up being okay, what's the next biggest, most important country that's going to hit midnight? So we can either cancel the pre-orders, that seems terrible, or we can just pull up the launch. And so UK was the next one that was going to hit midnight, which is why it was midnight UK time that we opened the floodgates, because otherwise every UK footballer would have gotten the app, that had pre-ordered it, would have had the app on their phone, and they would have logged in, and it would have been error or something terrible. And I was like, it's going to be like the worst launch of all time. And so, but that actually ended up playing to our favor because that was like, that created more like mystery and excitement, or like it moved up again, or moved up, and so just the whole thing ended up playing.
Are you getting any sleep in this time?
I don't get a lot of sleep.
Just like it feels a little bit hectic.
Yeah, the tough thing about living in the UK and working for a California-based company is the hours, and I have littles. I have a 7, a 5, and a 3-year-old boy, so that's the tough thing.
Did you sleep before, or have you just adjusted to this?
I used to sleep a lot. I slept a lot more before.
Yeah.
I've aged a lot this year. We didn't meet each other until this year, but I had a lot less gray hair.
Dude, I think you look great.
Oh, I'll take it.
Yeah, no,
I'll
I'm like real man crush. Like the design, fantastic.
I'm into
and my question now is like, I spoke to someone who I consider like a consumer social OG about the influencer activation strategy, and they were like, it's like importing the landed aristocracy to the US. And actually, like each platform, Mr. Beast on YouTube, the Kardashians on Instagram, D'Amelio on TikTok, they're like native to their own platform.
Yeah.
And this felt like importing landed aristocracy. How do you feel when you hear that? And is that right or wrong?
I don't know about aristocracy, but I think one of the things that played to our favor is there are a lot of platforms that do amazing work with creators out there. I talked about how TikTok is really good at breaking new talent. I think YouTube is the best at doing sustained, consistent payouts with their rev share program, because long form video is, I think, a lot more conducive to that. But if you look at all the different platforms, Instagram is it's the most popular in the creator community as far as we can tell. So the most creators use it. Now, more creators over time are using multiple platforms because they're becoming just more savvy and trying to make sure they diversify their risk, which I think is smart. But we have been, we're not always the most loved. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. But we've been the most important platform overall, not for an individual creator, but overall in the community, I think, for a while now. So we had this very rich, vibrant community of probably tens of millions of creators that we could just tap into with this in a way that I think was exciting. And then it ended up taking an energy of itself. As soon as you get enough big, not even big names necessarily, but like interesting names, then everyone's worried about missing out. And so then everybody tries it too, and then it creates a bit of a cycle.
Which name do you not have that you would love to have?
On Threads?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a bunch of people who
like
are
number one.
As my role or as a person?
Both.
I think a huge one will be Beyonce.
Yeah.
And in terms of my role, in terms of like cultural relevance, Taylor Nation, Swift Nation came over, but not Taylor Swift yet. But that'll also be a big deal. Her reach is insane. But as for me, based on my personal interests, I'm really bummed about how long it's going to take to support Europe, because I'm a football fan and there's so many amazing footballers in Europe. So like, to me, there's obviously the market and like reaching a bunch of people. But it's also
getting Ronaldo would be amazing.
Yeah.
Ronaldo or Messi.
Messi. Well, Messi's like, maybe he'll have a U.S. account when he goes over to Miami. Ronaldo can log in from Saudi Arabia. It's totally fine. But football and F1 are so important worldwide that I care every bit as much about making sure that maybe even more, that the platform is culturally relevant than the sort of the big number of users.
What did you make of, you mentioned kind of the centrality of, kind of enabling creators. Twitter have recently been, I've just seen screenshots on Twitter.
The payments?
Yeah, like payments for replies. I'm like, where's my fucking payment, Elon? Yeah.
I think you have to think long. I think paying, the creators, for a lot of creators, it's a business. And I think we've been trying to figure out ways to support those businesses for a while now. But I think you can't just pay everybody who's a creator, because if there's tens of millions of creators, that just adds up to money that's going to just completely destroy your business model. So you have to figure out ways to give them tools to make money, in my opinion. And so we focus on things like subscriptions, which are relevant to a subset of creators, but that's growing. Facilitating branded content deals, that's actually going very well on Instagram. And we do some payments as well, but that's more for bootstrapping. And then for, a segment that's creating real content that's really driving a lot of incremental value and revenue for Instagram. So look, I think it's going to get a bunch of attention for the next couple of days, but I think it's hard if it's unpredictable. If you're trying to run a business, you kind of need to know roughly what you're going to make ahead of time, and if you're kind of getting these lottery type checks, I think it gets much more harder to plan. I think that's a common complaint I've heard about how TikTok's payments compare to YouTube's payments, for instance, which are much more predictable. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, look, they're trying new things. I'm excited that, I don't know where Twitter's going to be in a year. They're shaking things up in all sorts of ways over there.
Facebook had the supposed 5 friends or 6 friends was like a retained user. Yeah. Do you have a metric as such with Threads?
We don't know what the number is yet. I do think you're going to need 2 different things. You're definitely going to need a critical mass, I think, of friends, and then you're going to need a quality of, or maybe it's a critical mass on your interest graph side as well. Now, we can bootstrap you by showing you recommendations if you don't follow anyone to start on the interest side. It's much more difficult to do that on the friend side. But by the way, that number for Facebook back in the day varied wildly by country.
Huh.
Like in Japan, it was 6, and in Indonesia, it was 106 or something bonkers. Because just cultural differences, internet usage differences meant that tipping point varied drastically from country to country.
A lot of social consumer app or consumer social apps get a lot of buzz. Admittedly, this has been unlike almost any other before. How do you think about retention? How do we retain a community?
It's just the primary focus. I think it's it's got to be the thing that the team focuses on for the next couple of months. I think we have to do a number of different things. We have to plug a bunch of obvious missing features.
What are the biggest missing features?
Following feed, edit button, just supporting the continent of Europe. I'm actually really excited about the Fediverse work that's coming and supporting ActivityPub.
When does Europe come?
Many months minimum.
February.
I'd be excited about that, honestly, at this point. It just requires...
What's the reasoning, sorry?
It's laws coming out next year, making sure that we're proactively compliant with them. It's about data separation, but it's also about being able to verify all of the statements you make about how data works, because we hold ourselves to very high standards on that. And if we're going to make claims, we have to make sure that we prove those claims are true, and that work is a lot. It's a lot of time. It's just a lot of time.
Are you a politician or a CEO?
I'm not either. I'm not a politician.
I mean it in the nicest way, but when you get to a stage where you're as big as Facebook, Meta, Instagram are, and you are CEO,
yeah, I mean, it's weird. Sometimes I forget that I have the job, and every once in a while I try to pinch myself, and be like, this is a pretty cool, wild thing you got to do with your time. I don't know. I think my job I think I'm very lucky to have my job. I think the way I think about it is, it's my job to build a team and set them up for success by pointing them at the right problems and giving the right support and feedback along the way. And sometimes that means a more specific direction, and sometimes that means, honestly, just being a glorified shit umbrella. Sometimes that means, sometimes I joke, because I deal with a lot of customer service requests from friends, family, extended friends, and DMs. So I joke that I'm a highly overpaid customer service rep. It just depends on the need. But it is a weird balance, because you think that the more senior you get, the more you just get to make decisions. But in a lot of ways, your influence becomes more and more indirect. And so it's a very odd experience sometimes.
What have you done from working with Mark? Speaking of
Mark, Mark has been really helpful in a couple different ways. Mark is always holding an incredibly high bar. I think one of his fears is that we fail hitting our goals all the way down. And so it's you can crush it. And then he's like, set that goal a little higher still, And I think there's a real value to that, which is just really, really setting a high bar. He's also very willing to take risks in a way that sometimes is infuriating, but I think is very good for the company over the long run. Like, for instance, on Threads, he was the one who was like, you guys should just try to build a separate app. And we were really trying to figure out a way to do it in the main app because it seemed like it would be much more likely to succeed. And he was by far the most convicted early on about taking a big
Is Threads a risk? Like, it doesn't work and it's a Facebook home that people forget. I don't mean it badly.
I mean, look, it's still a risk. I think if you fail, I think it can damage your reputation. It can damage your brand. It can make people less likely to want you to succeed in the future. It's a opportunity cost. The team is getting smaller, not bigger right now. And so, like, it's not a big team.
How big is the Threads team?
It's going to grow now. It started small. The team really properly formed a little less than 5 months ago or 5 months ago. We started working on it a little before, but the team didn't really form properly until maybe 5 months ago. Dozens, 50-something engineers, 3 PMs, 3 designers. It's pretty lean. But they're really, really good engineers, designers, PMs, data scientists, researchers. So the opportunity cost is not properly, I think, evaluated by the number.
Can I ask, from a business perspective, how does the business and monetization potential differ when comparing the video visual of Instagram Reels versus the text-based nature of Threads?
I actually think it's going to be easier. I think the ad formats will be less immersive, and I think that's a cost. But it is a text-based feed is about the highest monetization efficiency of any sort of online business I've seen. I think that and search are basically the two. Just because the number of things you consume per hour is just incredibly high because it's so light, which allows ads to really seamlessly integrate. And we fell into this business model with Facebook. We were putting ads in this sort of right-hand column on the side of the website, like, don't look over here. And the shift to mobile forced us to do it and ended up being one of the best businesses of all time.
No, I love that. Can I ask, when you think about success with Threads, what do you think success is to you? Do you have a metric yardstick?
For me, the thing I'm going to look at the most is probably, for the verticals we care about most, what does the creator community engagement look like? Because I think that's going to be a bellwether for how big the app is over the longer run. And then, right now the thing I care about most is retention. And there's no good signal now because it hasn't been long enough, and everyone who's signed up not everyone, but most of the people who've signed up have been early adopters and they use things differently. So we really just don't know yet. So it'll be the two things I'll focus on most for the next year will be the creator community, specifically, not only how many of them use the app, but how many of them share the app as a place for their creativity, and then retention for the average user. Those
are the two things that really would kill Threads or make it not a success. Why would creators not share on Threads? Like, what would cause that?
There's all sorts of reasons. If you get more reach elsewhere, like if, obviously Twitter is definitely a risk, then is it just worth your time? Like, they're busy. They're trying to make content. Often they don't just make content for a living. They do something else for a living too. Yeah. You're a musician, you're a footballer, etc.
Venture capitalist.
Yeah, exactly. And so, is the return worth your time? If it degrades in quality, slow or toxic or buggy, like all of those things can hurt you too.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. Can I just take a slightly weird turn?
I like the preamble for this question.
Yeah, it's just like, you're a great dude. And I joked about the references and but they were phenomenal.
Really?
Yeah,
that's good to hear.
They really were.
I like that.
But I'm also like, you're 3 kids as well.
Yeah.
And a happy marriage. And you're CEO of Instagram. It's not a fucking easy job.
Yeah.
My question to you is, when you look at all of it, how do you have the personal side and not lose an inch on work? I'm being very open. I'm nervous about opening my life up to the personal and losing an inch on work.
Yeah.
What advice would you have?
I just think you have to be really intentional about putting pen to paper on your priorities. I'm constantly feeling like I'm doing a shit job at something. I'm either not there for my kids enough, or I'm not there for my team enough, or I missed something that I could have helped the team avoid and blew up in our face. But I think I'm a shit friend because I'm never around. My life is Instagram and now Threads and my kids and my wife. And then like I barely see friends, which I feel terrible about. So every year I put down a few intentions. They used to be very measurable, and I would like grade myself at the end of the year, typical PMing my life kind of way. I got really good advice from a really close friend named Handro recently, which was just write yourself like a mantra, like a thing to say to yourself, and just say it every night before you go to bed. And that'll be the way to keep that intention top of mind, and it'll help you actually better live up to that intention. So every year I do it, and it changes every year, and it gets simpler usually every year.
What is it this year?
It's very personal. I don't know if I should share this on. I can share. Why not? So now the mantra is take care of yourself, love your children, support your wife, be there for your friends.
Do you think you can do all of them? And what I mean by that is like actually someone told me that you have your work, your family, and your friends.
Yeah.
You can only do 2 at once.
Yeah. I'm definitely not there for my friends as much as I would like to be. Occasionally, but not as much as I would like to be. I'm hoping relocating back to the U.S. will help with that because it'll be a little bit easier, but we'll see.
If you could call up yourself before your first child, when you're nervously expecting that first child to come,
oh yeah,
what would you tell yourself before becoming that father?
It's a race to the starting line. Before you have your first, you're so focused on the birth because it's terrifying, particularly obviously for the mom who has to actually do all the work. But you're like, how's this going to change my life? My brother was calling me a lot before he had his first, and I was like trying to wrap his head around about how his life was going to change. And I was like, this is the most absurd exercise. Like having a kid means you can't plan for how your life is going to change. All you know it's going to change a lot, and it'll continue to change. But we spent all this time focused on the birth, focus on how much paternity leave, when to take it, how much maternity leave, when to take it. But this person's coming into your life for 2 decades. The more important thing is how are you going to adjust how you do what you do so you can be there for them for 18 years. Not do you take 8 weeks or 12 weeks or 16 weeks of leave in year 1 that they're not going to remember. By the way, as the dad, your job is basically to take care of the mom. Yeah. And so I would just say it's a race to the starting line. I was way too focused on day 1 and way not ready for the rest of it.
How did you adjust how you work?
I started working less. I just ran out of hours. I used to come in really early. I used to try to take like the 6:12 shuttle in the morning and get in as soon as I could. And then come home after dinner. I just couldn't do that anymore. My goal is always to see the boys in the morning and the evening. And I get it 3 or 4 of the work days each week.
When you say be there for mum, I actually got that advice yesterday from a billionaire hedge fund investor. He was like, the only thing that matters, he said to the same question I just asked you, the thing I would tell myself is, don't worry about being there for the kids. The only thing that matters is being there for mum.
In the beginning, yeah.
What does that mean, being there for mum? Is that like a hug at the end? I'm really asking for the granular feedback.
Well, it's such a, I mean, like I had boys and they're all mama's boys, so they all much preferred their mom. I'm only now remotely relevant, and this is like 7 years in.
How old are they?
7, 5, and 3.
Wait until they're 13. Yeah, they want a girlfriend. When dad see her on Instagram, it's going to be like,
they don't know what I do at all. Someone asked Nico what I did the other day, and he said, I think he moves around chairs at the office. And I was like, what? And I was like, that is kind of what I do. Look, giving birth is a huge physical thing, I think, way people don't realize. So the physical recovery is real. If your wife or your partner breastfeeds, that's a huge thing. And you can, you should change all the diapers you can and do all the things you can, but the truth is they're going to need more from the mom than the dad, at least in my experience. And so what you can do best to help the kid is to support your wife in whatever way she needs, whether it's, she needs you to take care of the house or take care of work or whatever it is. Like, everyone's different. So that the better place she's in, the better place the kid's in my experience.
Huh. Have you done the love language thing?
Oh, yeah. I didn't do the test, but it's very clear.
What's your love language?
I'm all physical touch. All physical touch.
What's hers?
Acts of service and quality time, but it's different. It's quality time is just like time. It should just be time. She wants me to be around. She doesn't need me to talk to her. She wants me to come with her to the party. She won't talk to me the whole night, but it's really important that I'm there. So it's like proximity maybe is her version of quality time, and definitely like take out the garbage. We're packing right now. Like, I just like whatever it is, doing the dishes. Like she's like all about that stuff.
Every girl wants time. I wish every girl wanted materials.
Yeah. Gifts.
You can sanction out.
Yeah, it'd be a lot easier. It'd be a lot easier.
Listen, I want to do a quick fire. So I say a short statement. You give me your immediate thoughts.
Okay.
What single piece of content has had the most impact on you? Could be book, newspaper, blog, anything.
Ooh, actually, I'll pull it up. You'll have to excuse, it's not particularly gender sensitive, but there is a Hunter S. Thompson letter he wrote to a friend. I'm going to try to pull it up on my phone real quick. That I really, really hit home for me. I don't know. I'll find it in a second. But basically, it was about being intentional about how you spend your time.
And what is it? Hunter S. Thompson?
Hunter S. Thompson is an American author. Wild thing of a man. And
it's a book?
It's a letter he wrote to a friend who asked him for advice. Here, I'll read it. So basically, a younger man emails, we met letters of emails, this is fucking long before email, sends him a letter, and he wrote about a career advice or life advice. And he goes, as I see it then, the formula runs something like this. A man must choose a path which will let his abilities function at maximum efficiency towards the gratification of his desires. And doing this, he is fulfilling a need, giving himself identity by functioning in a set pattern toward a set goal. He avoids frustrating his potential, choosing a path which puts no limit on his self-development, and he avoids the terror of seeing his goal wilt or lose its charm as he draws closer to it, rather than bending himself to meet the demands of that which he seeks. He has bent his goal to conform to his own abilities and desires. In short, he has not dedicated his life to reaching a predefined goal, but he has rather chosen a way of life he knows he will enjoy. The goal is absolutely secondary. It is functioning toward the goal which is important. And it seems almost ridiculous to say that a man must function in a pattern of his own choosing, for letting another man define your own goals is to give up one of the most meaningful aspects of life, the definitive act of will which makes a man an individual. So I have this quote at the top of my yearly intentions that I write every year.
Does that not define your goals?
He does sometimes. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a balance. Having a boss is tough. You don't have a boss.
Sorry, dude. Yeah. But no, I love that, and that's fantastic. I mean, definitely link to it and read it. What have you changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
Oh, in the last 12 months? Ooh, that's a great question. I'm much more bullish on generative AI. I've been sort of, I was always interested in the space, but it seems it's happening much faster than I thought it would. I just thought it was further away. And I'm not.
Do you integrate it into what you do with Instagram and Threads in it?
I integrate it into my normal work life. Like,
you do?
I should be more interested in how it's going to change how people share online, but I'm much more interested in how it's going to just change workflows, and just allow people to do more with less.
How do you use it?
I use it to. Sometimes, like, some of my favorite writers are a little verbose, so I have it summarize articles. Don't tell anybody. I write pretty detailed reviews for my reports every 6 months. And so I don't have AI write it, but I have it take a first pass at summarizing all the feedback to make sure I didn't miss anything. I will sometimes give it a piece. I do a lot of writing at work. I will give it a piece of writing and tell an LLM what I was hoping to get out of it and ask for feedback. It's like little things. I just think it's going to be interesting how these technologies change how we work. We don't focus a ton on how we work. We focus more on the things that we build, generally in my industry, which makes sense because it's kind of why you get into it, to build something and just be able to point to your mom, and tell your mom at Christmas that you made this thing. But how we actually do, how productive we are is so important. And, you know, you can double or triple your chances of success. And it's like a schmatza kind of thing to get interested in, but I just think it's just so substantive. And so I'm really interested in how some of these technologies will change how marketers do their job, how designers do their job, how executives do their job. I think that stuff is going to be super interesting. And that's not the like AI, you know, intelligence, you know, bot future that a lot of people are focused on right now, but it is something I think is really fascinating.
Totally. As a venture investor, it's what I'm like, actively hunting.
Yeah.
You can be CEO of any company for a day.
Ooh.
Which would you be CEO of?
Any company for a day. Am I going back to my job? Or is it just like for the experience?
Just for like fun.
Oh. Disney probably. That just seems such like a wild thing. It's such a combination of amazing heritage and has to adapt, has done it a couple of times, needs to do it again. It's maybe a little like cliche of an answer, but I just think I like the range that they have.
What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Professional, I had a really, really harsh boss when I first started at Facebook, and I thought I was just crushing. I was like working on these projects, high profile. I'd only been in the company a couple of months, was doing mark reviews, all this stuff. And she said, "You lack focus." And I thought I was so focused. I was like, all my hours were accounted for and like getting all this stuff done. But I was spreading myself too thin over too many things. And I had never had a boss before. And she was not like, you know, didn't have a caring disposition, let's say. But she's fucking smart. And she's like, she's like, you know, I think she said something like, you're not focused and your work is suffering for it. And I think that was like a real, I think because it's also your first couple of months at a company, you're trying to establish yourself. It was like, it hit home in a way that it wouldn't have hit home 3 months after that. And it helped, I think, a lot over the long run.
I love that. Tell me, brand-wise and like design aesthetic-wise, if you were a brand or a design, which one would you most align yourself to?
There's no good answer to this question. I don't know.
I would say like I'm Audi.
You're Audi?
Yeah.
Actually, I can kind of see that.
This beautiful, efficient machine that just hums. Vorsprung-Technik.
For what it's worth, and this is not a commentary on you as a person, they are nicer on the outside than they are on the inside. I don't know. I mean, the brands I love.
That's a very savage summary. When you said that, I was like, no, what does it mean?
No, not you. Audi.
That's fine. That question's terrible. I hated it. What would you do? Seriously, what would you do now?
I don't know what I would be. What is my definition of like, what are the key things about my who I am and what my brand is? I don't know. I've range. As like I said before, I think I'm.
Is there a brand you really align with? Or even respect in my life? I really respect in my Chanel, a brand that transcends time, transcends geography.
Yeah.
Chinese love Chanel. French love Chanel. That's a very different customer base.
That is.
Time as well.
Yes.
Also budget. Amazing that you will get people who can't afford Chanel save and stretch for Chanel.
That's about aspiration. I mean, you're talking about the world of fashion. Chanel, Louis Vuitton, these things are like unbelievably strong brands over the years. I don't know. The ones that I find myself having more affinity for are a little bit more like what I thought was cool as like a teenager. Like I always loved Triumph's brand, the motorcycle.
Yeah.
The Cafe Racers. And I always loved back in the day because they were so crazy. This is probably I'm older than you, so this was you probably just missed this, but the Bang & Olufsen stereo equipment, they're around now, but their stereo equipment used to be insane. It used to be like these huge, like Kit Knight Rider style looking, visualizers and like all this nutty, hyper clean, hyper aggressive stuff that was like over the top and weirdly masculine. But as a 15-year-old boy, I was like, this is awesome. So we'll see. There's a lot of amazing brand work out there right now.
Who have you not met that you would love to meet?
Oh, I want to meet everybody. I love meeting people.
But like you see on Instagram, you can meet kind of anyone.
I know. I keep saying this is like one of the best perks of my job is I can just email people and they write me back. But I don't take advantage of it as much as I should.
But I'd ping Federer and be like, yeah.
I met him.
How was that?
Amazing. I met him in New York, and we were at an after party, and I talked to him for half an hour with my wife. Guys, literally every ounce as classy as you expect him to be. And my wife tells Roger Federer, who I think is the greatest tennis player of all time.
Not that she's a Nadal fan.
No. That her husband loves playing tennis in the summer. And so Roger Federer asks me to show him my swing. And I said,
there,
verbatim, yeah, we're in like a club in New York City. And I said, I think verbatim, what did I say? I'm not sure I get the words right. I said, there's no fucking way I'm going to show the GOAT my tennis swing. And he pushed 3 or 4 times, and I was like, it's not happening. It's not happening.
He goes onto his account the next day, account suspended.
Exactly.
Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, man, that'd be fun. He seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
He seems like a lot of fun. I feel like he's spending a lot of time in the UK now.
Yeah. But, I mean, yes, you should message him.
I was supposed to meet him
with your boy Harry.
Yeah.
We should do drinks together.
I was supposed to meet him, and then I got COVID. This was a couple of years ago.
It's a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
What do you think of Be Real?
I think it's a really powerful mechanic. I think it was an amazing moment. I think it was like incredibly culturally relevant. I think when you have that explosive growth like that, you just focused 100% on just keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing was, could they leverage that attention and expand? And I think that's what they've struggled to do, which I think is reasonable because it just was so much bigger than anyone ever thought it was going to be.
Can I ask you a final one, but a hard one, which I'm thinking a lot about? But it's like, what does success mean to you as a person? It encapsulates work. It encapsulates fatherhood, marriage, friendship.
I want to be proud of how I spent my time when I look back. That's kind of a hard question to know. It's hard to be able to identify exactly what you need to do to be able to say yes to that question, but it forces you to be honest about what you value, and it forces you to think about the long term, and it forces you to be somewhat aspirational. I always worry that I feel like time is just such a precious, precious thing, and I'm always worried I'm going to spend it poorly.
Honestly, Adam, it's shows like this which make me so grateful to do what I do. I knew this would be a great one, if I'm honest, but I was like...
I have no idea. I black out during these types of things, and I'll remember it later when I watch it.
But thank you so much for doing this, and I've absolutely loved it.
Thanks for having me. Such a blast.